Welcome. Today, we are diving deep into the 8th chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Anfal. Now, this isn't just any chapter. It's one that was born right in the heat of battle, and it ended up creating a foundational framework for conflict, for community, and for faith itself. So right out of the gate, the entire chapter kicks off with a really pressing question, one that came directly from the dust of the battlefield. The early Muslims had just won their first major victory, and almost immediately, a dispute broke out over who gets what. This opening verse, right here, sets the stage for the divine answer that was about to change everything. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with that initial question about the spoils. Then we'll trace the road to the legendary Battle of Badr. We'll explore the battle itself as a test of faith, and then really unpack the divine rules of war, the qualities of a believer, and finally, the lasting legacy of Al-Anfal. All right, so let's circle back to that first big question. This whole chapter was revealed in Medina, and it really revolves around the aftermath of that first huge battle for the early Muslim community. You gotta understand, this wasn't just about recording history, it was about laying down core principles for a brand new society in real time. You know, the name of the surah itself, Al-Anfal, tells you exactly what's at stake. It literally means the spoils. It points directly to the central issue of how to handle the gains of war, a question that honestly could have either united or completely divided this young, fragile community. And bam, right away, a foundational principle is established. Divine authority trumps any personal claim, especially when it comes to the community. This was a radical shift away from a winner-take-all or finders-keepers mentality. It was about collective responsibility and divine justice. Now, to really get these rules, you have to understand the battle that sparked them. And this wasn't just any skirmish. It was a moment that would define everything that came after. So the context here is absolutely crucial. Picture this. You have a community that's recently been exiled. They've had their homes, their property, everything seized by the Quraysh in Mecca. So they decide to intercept a trade caravan belonging to that very same tribe, partly as a way to reclaim some of what they'd lost. But things escalated fast. And just look at the mismatch here. I mean, it is not even close. The Muslims were totally unprepared for a full-scale war. They were outnumbered more than 3-1 with way less equipment. It sets the stage for what looks like an impossible confrontation at a place called Badr. So let's move to the battle itself, because how the surah explains the shocking outcome is where the narrative shifts from being just a military event to a profoundly spiritual one. According to the text, this victory wasn't secured by superior strategy or numbers, not at all. Instead, it's presented as the direct result of divine support, given to a community that held on to its faith against absolutely overwhelming odds. Now, this is just fascinating. The text here describes multiple, very specific forms of divine aid. It says a calming sleep overcame the believers, which eased their anxiety. And then rain started to fall, just enough to firm up the loose sandy ground, making it easier for them to plant their feet and fight. Incredible detail. And then there's this element. This verse explains that angels were actually sent to support the fighters. Their job was twofold. 1, to strengthen the resolve of the believers, and 2, to demoralize their opponents by casting terror into their hearts. So the battle is really being fought on both a physical and a metaphysical plane. So the battle is won. The victory is secured. But that initial question, what do we do with the spoils, is still hanging in the air. This is where the surah circles back to provide a clear resolution and, in the process, lays down these timeless principles for conduct in conflict. To stop any future arguments, the surah introduces a very specific financial rule called the khums. And this isn't just about splitting up money. It's about building social justice right into the laws of war. And this system is pretty remarkable when you break it down. As you can see, it makes sure the individual fighters are rewarded for their sacrifice, but it also creates this kind of community treasury. A full 1/5 of the gains are set aside to care for the most vulnerable people in society. It's like an early blueprint for a social safety net. But what's so crucial here is that the guidance isn't just about how to wage war. It's also about when to end it. The text explicitly commands that if your enemy leans towards peace, you are obligated to do the same and to put your trust in God. Peace isn't presented as a weakness, it's the primary goal. And this adds such a powerful layer of mercy, especially when it comes to prisoners of war. It offers a path to redemption, a way forward, even for captured enemies.
It suggests that their future isn't sealed by their defeat, but by the potential for good that God might find in their hearts.
So, we've gone from the battlefield to the rules of conflict, but then Al-Anfal does something really interesting. It pivots. It uses this historic moment to look inward and define the true internal characteristics of a believer.
The focus shifts from the external battlefield to the internal state of the heart. The text starts to outline the spiritual qualities that are the real foundation of the community's strength. It's not just about what you do on the outside, but who you are on the inside.
And these verses here, they really describe the tangible proof of that inner belief. It's about complete trust in God, consistent prayer, and giving to others from what you have. The message is pretty clear. Faith isn't passive. It has to be demonstrated through action.
So after all that, what's the big takeaway here? When you step back and look at the whole picture, what is the lasting legacy of this pivotal chapter? Ultimately, it gives us this incredible blueprint we've just walked through. It shows how faith is tested in the hardest times, how victory is attributed to God, not human might, and how the results of that victory, the spoils, become a powerful tool for social welfare and justice, strengthening the bonds of the entire community. And in the end, Al-Anfal leaves us with this powerful question to think about. It really invites us to reflect on that deep, enduring connection between our spiritual principles and the tough ethical questions of our worldly affairs, whether we find ourselves in times of peace or in times of conflict.